Hi. If you draw a chalk circle around a toad, it won't jump out of the circle. Most of them won't jump out of the circle because it thinks it's trapped and it accepts its confinement. Now, clearly, most people who try to control our thinking and behaviour in the so-called Free West have become toads in a chalk circle and are trying to make us the same. We can only view things through the myopic lens of limited perceptions and bigotry that we are fed on a daily basis by the media, politicians, and self-appointed spokespeople. People don't think outside the box or the chalk circle because they are hypnotized into believing that they can't, and that the circle of truth is truth and anything outside is dangerous. This is exactly what happened with Tucker Carlson's interview with Russian President Putin. It was entirely predictable. On both sides of the Atlantic, from Hillary Clinton to the self-righteous Guardian newspaper in the UK, they ridiculed the interview as sycophancy and being soft and poor journalism. This ignores several things. One, by now, most thinking people, an ever-diminishing little band admittedly, know that our own media has long abandoned investigative journalism and critical inquiry. Interviews are just exchanges of headlines and sound bites. There is almost no critical thinking and no real extended debate. Programs like Question Time are propaganda shows. We live like the toad in a chalk circle, a lie, and we are so manipulated into thinking that Putin is the devil or Hitler that no other view is allowed. News sources that might put a different view on the Ukraine are banned, silenced, cancelled. Russian athletes are outcasts. The usual 1984 Orwellian newspeak machine rolls over all opposition. But Putin is intelligent. He would have predicted this because he has watched us live in this little chalk circle of ignorance, as have other countries, India, South Africa, China, South American countries. So to criticise Tucker Carlson is to show a complete lack of self-awareness and hypocrisy. Second, the people who are denouncing the interview and telling us what to think had already decided what they would say about it, so they couldn't really either listen or interrogate it. But here's my take on the interview. It was over 2 hours long. That in itself is a rarity because we live in a culture of truncated listening ability and reduced levels of attention and concentration. And the interview was essentially like a drama in 3 parts. The first act was Putin giving a very long, digressive historical journey through Russian history. And to many viewers and listeners, this would be boring and irrelevant and self-indulgent. This is not an interview, it's a historical lecture. But I think it was Putin saying, if we're going to have a serious discussion about Russia today and the Ukraine, it's important to understand history and context and values, the people and events that have led to this moment, the shaping forces of culture and politics. You need to understand what it means, as far as I'm concerned, Putin, to be Russian. This is not going to be a quick-fire, soundbite, point-scoring interview like your viewers are used to. We're going to take our time. And I think that's what he was doing. You're going to find out who I am and who I think the Russian people are. If on the other side, we in the West were to talk about what it now means to be European or an English person, we'd be lost. And most young people have been educated out of historical awareness. And in the second act of the interview, he put the Russian view. Of course he did. What else was he going to do, for God's sake? The view of the recent history between Russia and the so-called Free West. The fact that that post-communist Russia became free market and entrepreneurial like other Western nations, and therefore it assumed the West would be allies rather than stay in the chalk circle of Cold War thinking. And bearing in mind the fact that without Russia, we would not have won the Second World War and we would probably now be speaking German. But nothing short of the destruction of Russia into fragmented, conflicting territories would satisfy the United States and some of Europe after the Second World War, and this is still the case. Now, this is not the view of a madman or a delusional empire builder. It's the rational view of someone who is not trapped inside a chalk circle. You know, why couldn't we work together? Thirdly, he didn't duck questions about Ukraine. He talked at length about the Minsk agreement that was torn up and thrown away, the ignored agreement after the Second World War that Ukraine would not be part of NATO, which is of course a proxy military wing of the US. He talked about the coup d'etat, which put Zelensky in power. He talked about the neo-Nazi elements in the Ukraine and the tens of billions of dollars that the US and others in the West have used to weaponize the Ukraine into war against Russia. He also talked of the persecution of Russian-speaking people and practicing Christians in Ukraine. These are all things in the public domain. Weaponizing the borders of Ukraine against Russia was, of course, a provocation. As Putin has repeatedly said for years now, if Russia or China started putting missile bases and troops along the Mexican border facing the US, there would be a war within hours. I'm not saying anything outrageous here. All these things are out there and verifiable. I think on a more personal level, what was striking about Putin, even given a translator was mediating, was that he was polite, he was articulate, he could recite dates and names and events without notes, and he was a man who knew who he was, whether you like that or not. When we look at most Western leaders, I doubt they have a clue who they are or what culture they really stand for. Like Tony Blair, I think they just make themselves up every day from cliches and propaganda into sort of like some cardboard Frankenstein. Joe Biden can't find his way out of a room. Macron is like Nero fiddling while Paris and much of France burns. Angela Merkel has publicly admitted that the whole European migrant insurge that she helped to engineer has been nothing but a disaster. Also, in the Tucker Carlson interview, Putin didn't go in for character assassination, which is what most Western leaders do as a knee-jerk position. And when you do that, you are firmly inside the chalk circle, and you can't entertain anything outside it. When asked about the American being held as a spy in Russia, he of course said it's a matter of international law, and there are people negotiating even as we speak. Now, is he seriously going to say, oh yeah, now you mentioned him, I'll release him? Of course he's not going to say that, but he didn't go in for cheap responses like, why do you imprison people like Julian Assange without trial or justifiable reason? He didn't ask about things like Guantanamo Bay or illegal drone attacks by the West. I'm aware that to say anything positive about Putin is to be seen as a traitor, but a traitor to what exactly? I'm saying these things not to glorify Putin, but because I care about what happens in the world, and I care about the deliberate dismantling of Western culture. And I'd say these things to suggest that what the interview revealed about the diminishing powers of discrimination and thought in our own political class. As Otto von Bismarck said, diplomacy is the art of building ladders to allow people to climb down gracefully. It is not about squatting inside the chalk circle like the poor deluded toad. If you like this video, please do share and subscribe. Thank you.